Brahma grows by tap. What does that mean? Tap here relates to desire. Desire. Desire is making the impossible happen. The impossible cannot happen. So obviously that which is happening is a mirage, a chimera. Brahma cannot grow. Brahma cannot take shape. Brahma cannot expand, take forms or names, move from one thing into the other, become measurable. Not possible. But desire is Maya. Maya is making the impossible happen. For whom? We come back to our favorite question. For whom? For whom does Brahma grow? For itself? Not at all. Brahma has no need, no capacity, no limit, no obligation to look back at itself, to reflect at itself. Brahma does not indulge in anything, let alone these kinds of fragmentations. But Brahma grows. What does growth mean here? Growth means that the formless assumes a form. The complete becomes incomplete. And it's quite interesting how the complete turning into incomplete has been referred to as growth. But that's what desire is all about, no? What you actually want is not at all beneficial to you. And what you want actually turns you into someone, something lesser. But you call it growth. So tap. What does tap mean here? The force of desire. The feeling that there is something amiss. That makes the imperceptible, complete, formless, intangible Brahma assume tangible proportions. It all starts from that fundamental desire. That desire is Maya. That desire is the most fundamental power inherent in Brahma. So, Brahma grows into something very subtle, and then from that subtle something comes gross material, matter, which has been referred to as Anna. And then from that arise all the worlds, the various universes. And then, when there is so much spread, so much manifestation, then comes the desire to break out of this net, the net of mortality. Hence, the desire to be immortal. Hence, the desire to move into formless, complete Brahma again. And that completes the circle. Do you see what is happening here? There is just Brahma, nothing else. And then there is desire. For whom? The desirous one. And then there is desire. The desire is initially only in the form of something very subtle. It is not very clearly, sharply expressed. You call it just a primitive tendency. Then that tendency starts taking shapes. Firstly, the shapes are mental, and then the shapes are material. And ultimately, those shapes multiply, diversify, interact with each other, and turn into the many universes. But all these universes, they are nothing but multiple webs of death. So the desirous one, caught in these universes, then struggles to break free of these universes that he himself spawned. Remember the previous verse? Like the spider builds the web and then takes the web into itself. Similarly, desire creates worlds and worlds with itself at the center, and then finding nothing in those words, turning utterly dissatisfied with the worlds it itself has created, it then aspires to be relieved of its worlds. Desire relieved of its own shadows, its own hopes, its expressions, is back to Brahma. You see how the entire cycle has been explained? Your world is with you at the center. Brahma is just the substratum. It has been referred to in various ways in Vedantic literature. Sometimes it's called the substratum, sometimes the background, sometimes the space, the ether in which everything is happening, sometimes the watcher, sometimes the progenitor, sometimes the mega controller who operates only at the meta level. The idea behind all these expressions has one thing in common. Brahma has no interest in any participation at the macro level. At the micro level, it's your own doing. Getting it? It's the play of your own tendencies. Getting it? Your own tendencies make you see a problem where there is none. You imagine. And then you do a lot to get rid of that problem. And then, obviously, to do a lot, you create the entire space in which a lot of doing can happen. No? If you want to play a game, you cannot just play it. Right? You want to play golf or tennis or cricket. Right? You cannot just randomly and suddenly initiate the game. If you're a serious player, as we all are, then you in fact require to build an entire stadium. Why? Just because you wanted to play one game. That's what desire does. Because it has to do what it has to do, therefore it has to create an entire universe. That's the reason why our universe exists. So that we may do just a few things. Are you getting it? Even if you have to play a 10-over match, you need to create an entire infrastructure for it. No? Our life is that 10-over match. Amounting to nothing. Nothing much at all. But what do? We build an entire like somebody deciding to fly to a place just 200 kilometers away. The place might be just 200 kilometers away. But if you have decided to fly, then what all do you need to build? What do you need to build? Imagine. You actually need to launch satellites. You need rockets. You need rockets that go beyond the atmosphere of the earth. You would be flying well within the limits of the atmosphere. Needless to talk of all the infrastructure that you need to build on the ground. The airports and such little things. Just because you wanted to experience one flight. So, just because we want to live that small happy life of 60 years with 2 or 4 or 6 of our near ones, the entire cosmos has to exist. Entire cosmos. No, it does not exist on its own. It exists because you want a nest within it. Your nest necessitates the entire cosmos. So, your nest is not within the cosmos. The cosmos is within your nest. Well, poetically, you have always said that, have you not? But it turns out that it is true conceptually as well. Poetry meets mathematics. So when you say, my little house is my universe, You are horribly right. It's your desire that breeds the universe. Else there is nothing. Else there is nothing. So there is desire that gives birth to the worlds. And then there is desire that gets fed up of the worlds and returns to the pure, the original, the immutable. The first kind of desire that brought us where we are, it's not much use discussing it now, because the deed has been done. We do exist today, at least in our own frame of reference. Right? Evolution has taken place. We cannot de-evolve now. What do we do then? We make use of the second kind of desire. What is the second kind of desire? That will take you back to where you came from. Getting it? That's the import of this verse. One has to be very careful. Otherwise, it's quite easy to be misled by the use of the terms tap and an here. Remember that Vedanta has nothing to do with stuff miscellaneous. It talks only of the one. And if the one is too difficult to talk of, it talks of two. Truth and the mind. And if the listeners clamor too much for detail, then at most it talks of three. Truth, the mind, and the body. The rishis were simple people. They loved relaxation. They were too wise to indulge in needless details. When the 1,000 are all included in one, how wise is it to talk individually of the 1,000? Like efficient mathematicians, they referred only to the one. Which one am I talking of? Mind. Why refer to the 1,000 things in the mind? Simply call all that as mind stuff. Full stop. Otherwise, there is no end. With nothing at its center, the mind still has the magical capacity to keep weaving an infinite net. Innumerable things the mind can breed. The wise one says, why talk of all that diversity? Why be so interested in it? I know all those things are just one. Otherwise, one can just be lost in the count. Getting it? There is no end to diversity. If you cannot see the commonness behind stuff, the oneness behind things, then you will be consumed by the count. So they don't talk of too many things. So the rishis have no business talking of food or grain, cereals, mundane things. Moment you see such a thing being talked of, you should immediately know that something else is being referred to. Never deviate from the first principles. Never. All the verses have to be read in the light of the first principles. And the first principles have nothing to do with food. Disputably, the rishis were fun-loving people. But they had higher sources than food to extract fun from. They won't be so particular about an as to give it a place of pride adjacent to Brahma. In the same verse where you are talking of Brahma, if you find an too mentioned, then you should know it's just a pointer towards something else. Right? So what does an refer to? Material. Gross manifestation. Gross mind. So there is nothing. Then there is just the little sensation, that little vibration, that beginning of movement, which is nothing but the beginning of deviation from the center, which is nothing but the beginning of Maya. And then that which is in the beginning, just a little vibration, a bit of a spasm, in due course of time explodes into the entire universe. Which in due course of things sees its own futility and therefore recedes back into the source. Getting it? The entire curve is the movement of Maya or desire. You should know the point you are standing at on that curve. If you know where you are, you would also know what you ought to do. You've already come a long distance. You cannot undo the journey. You cannot untravel the distance. What do you do then? Complete the cycle. Have the right desire that stimulates you into the right action. And therefore the verse says, Satyam loka karmasu chamritam. The right works, the right actions that lead you into immortality. That's what you need to do now. Now that you have chosen to be in the world of action, you cannot avoid action. Act rightly, therefore. Act vigorously, act rightly. Would have been wonderful had you not needed to act at all. Had you not been present at all. Had you not taken birth at all. But you are born now. Past is irreversible. In our own eyes we exist. And we exist as creatures of suffering. Therefore, what do? We do justice to this birth. Having chosen to be born, now justify your birth. No, but we didn't choose to be born. You see, if you know that much, I too know that you know that much. So if I am saying that we have chosen to be born, obviously there is something I mean. Kindly try to grasp. Our consciousness goes into our self only to a small degree. Your self is like a deep well. And your consciousness is like the light of a feeble electric torch that you throw into the well. How deep does the light penetrate? And the well is old and deep. It's not as if it is a reservoir of clean and clear water. There is all kind of dubious, nefarious stuff cluttered within it. And primitive spiders have woven webs that your torchlight cannot penetrate. The area illuminated by your torchlight is the conscious mind. It is only a small part of yourself. Beneath that, there is a lot that you do not know of. So your choices come from there. You refuse to own those choices because those choices aren't conscious choices. Your refusal means very little. They are your choices, even if They were unconsciously made. So being born is one such choice. And how is it possible? When I am not yet born, how do I decide to be born? How is it even conceivable that a child decides to be born? Maybe only the body is born. Maybe the tendency that decides to take birth exists even before the body. Maybe what you are calling as birth is just the physical appearance of the desire. Maybe the desire pre-exists its gross appearance. Oh, how is it possible? You mean that I existed even before my birth? Of course you did. Not in a physical way. Not in a physical way, but you did exist. And I'm not talking of the Atman here. I'm talking of that primitive tendency that pervades all existence. That tendency which keeps taking birth again and again in the form of every new child. The tendency decided to take birth, right? That tendency is you. So you decided to take birth. Now, fine. Having decided to be born, now make good use of whatever is available to you. To put it realistically, let's make the best use of a bad situation. Well, we may decide to entertain ourselves by thinking that it's great to have taken birth and we are here to really have a good time. It's like being invited to a party or something. No one is born on a Saturday night. Unfortunately, it's not quite that way, and we know that. Yeah. The first step in spirituality is to honestly acknowledge that it's not quite the great situation we keep telling ourselves it is. So let's make the best of a bad place. Right? Which is that you are condemned to desire, at least desire rightly. You cannot not desire. You cannot not act. You cannot not want. The best is to obviously be in a situation where you don't need to want, but you need to want. You need to want, you need to be attracted, you need to beg, you need to practice, you need to work, you need to love. Desire rightly, act rightly, think rightly, work rightly, love rightly. The result of the right pursuit that it will be that you'll come to a point where you'll not need to work or desire or act or even love.